The night sky over Earth lit up with strange lights. At first, people thought it was just another meteor shower. But then, the lights did not fade. Instead, they grew larger, spreading across the atmosphere like fire in the wind. The world watched in shock as massive alien ships descended from the sky, casting enormous shadows over cities. The HFY had arrived. For centuries, the HFY Dominion had conquered countless planets. They were a ruthless empire, spreading across the stars, crushing any species that stood in their way. To them, Earth was just another weak world, another easy victory. Their warships hovered above Earth, preparing their attack. People panicked. Governments tried to make contact, sending messages of peace, but the HFY did not answer. They never negotiated with lesser species. Instead, they only gave one response: destruction. Without warning, the first attack began. From the sky, powerful energy weapons rained down upon the cities. Blinding beams of light struck buildings, streets, and homes. The HFY expected everything to burn, to crumble into dust. But something strange happened. Nothing was destroyed. The buildings still stood. The streets remained unharmed. The people were completely fine. The HFY warlords aboard their flagship, Zorvek, watched in confusion. Their weapons were designed to erase entire civilizations in seconds, but Earth was untouched. Impossible, one of the commanders growled. Fire again. The ships unleashed more attacks, stronger this time. The skies burned with power beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Yet the result was the same. Nothing happened. On the ground, people looked around in confusion. They saw the blinding lights, heard the loud explosions, but felt nothing. Some even reached out their hands, letting the alien energy beams pass right through them like harmless sunlight. The HFY commanders grew nervous. This had never happened before. Every other planet had fallen before their might. But this species, humans, were untouched by their most powerful weapons. Then, something even worse happened. Earth fought back. The world's military forces had no idea why they were still alive, but they were not going to waste the opportunity. Jets soared through the skies, tanks rolled into position, and missiles launched toward the alien invaders. Unlike the HFY's weapons, human firepower worked perfectly. A squadron of fighter jets locked onto one of the HFY warships and fired. Missiles streaked through the air and slammed into the ship's hull. The explosion was deafening. The warship trembled, its energy shields failing, its metal body breaking apart. For the first time in their history, the HFY were taking damage. On the flagship Zorvek, alarms blared. Commanders rushed to their stations, shouting orders. This was supposed to be an easy invasion, yet the humans were fighting back and winning. How are they resisting? One officer cried. Their weapons are primitive, yet effective. Another reported. The supreme warlord of the HFY, Vrotan, clenched his fists. His species had never lost a battle. They had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. But now, against all logic, they were losing to a species that still used gunpowder and metal bullets. Retreat to low orbit. He ordered. We must understand what is happening. The massive fleet pulled back, retreating beyond Earth's atmosphere. The skies cleared, the explosion stopped, and for the first time, humanity realized something incredible. The most powerful weapons in the galaxy were useless against them. The world stood still. People stared at the sky, watching the defeated alien ships flee. The war had just begun, but already, Earth had done the impossible. The HFY fleet hovered just beyond Earth's atmosphere, their ships damaged and their pride shattered. Inside the Zorvek, the supreme warlord Vrotan stood in front of a massive holographic screen, replaying the battle. No matter how many times he watched it, the truth remained the same. Humanity had survived their most powerful weapons. This is impossible, the HFY commander muttered. Our energy cannons should have reduced their cities to dust. But they didn't. Another officer said, voice filled with unease. Not a single human was harmed. It was as if our weapons didn't exist to them. Vrotan clenched his fists. The HFY Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. No species had ever resisted them. But now, a primitive race, one that had only just begun space travel, was standing against them. He refused to accept this humiliation. "We will take their world," he growled. "If our weapons do not work, then we will crush them with brute force. Prepare the ground forces." On Earth, people watched the sky in fear. The first battle had ended, but everyone knew it was not over. The HFY would return. The governments of the world sent messages across the globe. Every military must be ready. Soldiers, tanks, and jets moved into position. Scientists scrambled to understand why the alien weapons had failed, but there was no time for answers, because the invasion was about to begin. From the dark sky above, massive alien transport ships descended, landing in cities, forests, and open plains. Then, the doors opened. The HFY warriors marched out. They were over 8 feet tall, covered in thick exoskeleton armor. Their 4 glowing eyes scanned their surroundings, their clawed hands gripping plasma rifles. Even if their large warships had failed, the HFY were still dangerous warriors. They had conquered entire planets with ground forces alone before. As the first squad reached the streets of a human city, they aimed their plasma rifles at the closest human soldiers and fired. Nothing happened. The green energy bolts shot forward, but instead of burning through flesh and armor, the shots simply vanished on impact. The humans felt nothing. A soldier blinked in confusion. Is that supposed to do something? The HFY warriors hesitated. They fired again. More shots, more plasma, more energy. But again, it did nothing. The humans were completely immune. For the first time in their history, the HFY felt fear. Then, the human soldiers opened fire. Bullets ripped through the air, striking the alien invaders. Unlike the humans, the HFY were not immune. Their exoskeleton armor cracked under the force of human gunfire. Some warriors fell instantly. Others roared in pain, trying to retreat. The battle spread across the planet. HFY warriors stormed into cities, only to realize their weapons were useless. They tried using stun grenades, energy blades, and even chemical gas attacks, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, human weapons worked perfectly. Tanks fired shells that tore through alien ranks. Snipers took down HFY commanders from rooftops. Fighter jets launched missiles that obliterated entire squads of invaders. Humanity was fighting back, and they were winning. Back in orbit, panic spread across the HFY fleet. Warlord Vrotan watched as reports flooded in. Every battlefield was the same. Humans could not be harmed, but they could harm the HFY. "Pull them out," he roared. "Retreat. Get them off that planet." The HFY ground forces, once so confident, were now fleeing in terror. Their transport ships barely managed to take off as human forces chased them down. Some were too slow. Explosions filled the sky as HFY ships were shot out of the air. Finally, what remained of the invasion force returned to orbit. The HFY had been completely defeated. In the silent war room of the Zorvek, the officers stood frozen. They had never lost a battle before. But today, they had not just lost. They had been hunted. One officer whispered, "What? What are they?" Vrotan had no answer. His warriors, his empire, his entire way of life had just been broken by a species he had thought was weak. But one thing was clear now. Humans were something the universe had never seen before. The HFY fleet floated in orbit, their warships damaged, their warriors humiliated. Inside the massive flagship Zorvek, Supreme Warlord Vrotan stood motionless, staring at the battlefield reports. It made no sense. His forces had attacked with overwhelming strength. Their weapons should have wiped out humanity in seconds. But instead, they had lost. "Warlord," an officer spoke hesitantly. Our ground forces have returned. Over 80% casualties. The humans, they tore through us. Vrotan turned slowly, his 4 glowing eyes filled with rage. And the weapons? Were they truly useless? Yes, Warlord, the officer admitted. Energy rifles, grenades, plasma cannons, none of them worked. The humans did not even flinch. Silence filled the war room. The XL-FAR had never faced an enemy like this. Every species they had conquered had fallen easily. Even the strongest warriors of the galaxy had trembled before them. But humanity was something else. A sudden alarm blared through the ship. The lights dimmed, turning red. A communications officer shouted, "Warlord, human forces are launching an attack." Vrotan's eyes widened. Impossible. They don't have space travel advanced enough to. Before he could finish, explosions rocked the fleet. The massive warships trembled as missiles and railgun fire tore into them. The humans were not waiting for another invasion. They were taking the fight to the stars. On Earth, the counterattack had begun. The world's greatest scientists and engineers had worked nonstop since the first battle. Using captured alien weapons and data, they had developed a plan. If humanity could not be harmed by energy weapons, they did not need shields or advanced technology. Instead, they would use their greatest strength, brutal, unstoppable firepower. With shocking speed, humanity had modified old rockets, turning them into space weapons. Satellites had been repurposed into railgun platforms, and fighter jets had been refitted to operate in low orbit. The result? A surprise attack unlike anything the XL-FAR had ever faced. The first wave of hypersonic missiles launched from Earth, streaking through space faster than any XL-FAR ship could react. They slammed into the enemy fleet, causing massive explosions. Ships that had once destroyed planets now burned in the void. Then came the second wave. Human warplanes, now equipped with powerful railguns, soared into space, firing high-speed projectiles that punched through the hulls of enemy ships like paper. Unlike energy weapons, these bullets and shells did not dissipate. They tore through metal, bone, and armor alike. The XL-FAR tried to fight back, but their weapons still did nothing. Their plasma cannons fired harmlessly, their energy shields failed, and their advanced targeting systems could not stop the relentless human assault. For the first time, the hunters had become the hunted. Inside the Zorvek, the war room was in chaos. Officers shouted, alarms blared, and the ship trembled under human firepower. Their weapons are primitive but devastating. An officer cried, "They have no shields, no advanced targeting, but they are destroying us." Vrotan's hands shook with rage. He had thought this would be an easy victory. Now he was watching his greatest war fleet crumble before his eyes. "Retreat," he finally roared. "Pull back to the nearest moon. We need to understand this enemy before we are wiped out." The remaining XL-FAR ships desperately turned and fled, leaving behind wreckage and burning debris. The humans did not chase them. They had already sent a clear message. Earth was not to be conquered. Earth was not weak. Earth would fight back. As the last XL-FAR warships vanished into the darkness of space, the people of Earth stood victorious. They had faced the most feared conquerors of the galaxy, and won. But humanity knew this was not over. The XL-FAR would return. And next time, the humans would be even stronger. The XL-FAR fleet limped through space, their once mighty warships now scared and broken. Inside the Zorvek, Supreme Warlord Vrotan stood at the command deck, his 4 glowing eyes burning with rage. Never before had his species suffered such a humiliating defeat. The humans had shattered his invasion, resisted his weapons, and even attacked his fleet in space. Nothing about this made sense. The XL-FAR were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Yet, against this so-called primitive species, they had been powerless. "Warlord," a trembling officer spoke, "we cannot return to the Dominion like this. The High Council will see this as a failure." Vrotan's fists clenched. He knew the truth. If he returned in disgrace, the High Council would strip him of his command. He would be remembered as the first Sci-Fi leader to lose a war. That was unacceptable. "No," he growled. "We are not done. We will find the secret of their immunity. And when we do, we will return and destroy them." Meanwhile, on Earth, the world celebrated. For the first time in history, humanity had defeated an alien invasion. People cheered in the streets, nations put aside their differences, and scientists worked together to study the alien technology left behind. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside a secret underground base, the world's greatest scientists and military leaders gathered. They had one goal: to understand why humans were immune to alien weapons. A scientist named Dr. Marcus stood before a holographic display, showing data from the battle. "We have tested the Sci-Fi's energy weapons on everything. Our buildings, our machines, and even animals. They work perfectly." "Then why don't they work on us?" a general asked. Dr. Marcus took a deep breath. "We don't know. The energy should vaporize anything it touches. But when it hits a human, it's like it doesn't exist." The room fell silent. "If we don't know why," another scientist said, "then we can't be sure it will last." The general nodded grimly. "Which means we can't just sit and wait. The Sci-Fi will come back." Everyone in the room knew it was true. The Sci-Fi would not accept defeat. Humanity had to be ready. Far across the galaxy, the Sci-Fi made their next move. Inside a hidden research station, deep in the cold void of space, the Sci-Fi's greatest scientists gathered. They had captured other alien species in the past, using them for experiments. Now, they needed to study the humans. Vrotan stood before the research leader, Kelvek, a scientist known for his ruthless experiments. "Can you find their secret?" Vrotan demanded. Kelvek's glowing eyes flickered with excitement. "I will need a specimen." Vrotan understood immediately. "You want a live human?" Kelvek grinned. "Yes, Warlord. Bring me a human, and I will tear apart their mystery." Vrotan's face twisted into a cruel smile. "Then we hunt." Back on Earth, the first signs of trouble appeared. Reports came in from different parts of the world. People were disappearing. Soldiers, scientists, even ordinary citizens. One moment, they were there. The next, they were gone. At first, people thought it was random. But then, security footage from a military base revealed the truth. In the dead of night, a strange shimmer appeared in the air. Then, out of nowhere, tall, armored figures stepped through invisible portals. Sci-Fi assassins. They moved fast, capturing a scientist before anyone could react. Within seconds, they vanished again, disappearing into thin air. "They're taking people," Dr. Marcus whispered in horror. The general slammed his fist on the table. "They're studying us. They're looking for our weakness." Panic spread across the command center. If the Sci-Fi discovered the secret of humanity's immunity, they could find a way to break it. And then, Earth would be doomed. Deep in space, inside the Sci-Fi research station, a human soldier woke up. His head throbbed, his body restrained by cold metal cuffs. Around him, tall alien figures studied him with glowing eyes. Strange devices beeped and hummed. He realized instantly he had been captured. A figure stepped forward. "Kelvek." "Welcome, human," the scientists sneered. "You are about to make history. Your species may be immune to our weapons, but soon I will know why." The soldier gritted his teeth. He didn't know what the aliens planned to do to him. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to make it easy for them. The cold metal restraints dug into Daniel's wrists as he sat in the center of the Sci-Fi research lab. The alien room around him pulsed with an eerie green light, filled with strange machines and floating holograms. His head still throbbed from whatever stun technology they had used to capture him. Across from him, the Sci-Fi scientist Kelvek observed him with cold, calculating eyes. The tall alien moved with slow, deliberate steps, his claws tapping against the metal floor. "You are the first human ever captured," Kelvek said, his voice filled with cruel amusement. "You should feel honored." Daniel remained silent. His mind was racing, analyzing everything in the room. He needed a way out. Kelvek motioned to his assistants. "Begin the tests. We must understand why these creatures resist our weapons." A robotic arm lowered from the ceiling, holding a small energy probe. The machine pulsed with a bright blue light before sending a powerful energy blast straight at Daniel's chest. Nothing happened. The energy wave disappeared upon impact, just like during the battle on Earth. Daniel felt nothing. The HFY assistants murmured in confusion, their eyes widening. Kelvek's smug expression faltered. "This is not possible," the scientist hissed. "This should burn through any organic matter." Another machine activated, sending a concentrated plasma beam at Daniel's skin. Again, nothing. Kelvek's frustration grew. "Increase the power. We must break through whatever protects them." The HFY cranked up their machines, filling the room with a hum of deadly energy. But no matter how strong the attack, Daniel remained unharmed. He smirked. "Not working, huh?" Kelvek slammed a clawed fist against the console. "Enough. If energy does not affect you, we will try something else." He turned to his assistants. "Prepare the biological dissection." Daniel's smirk disappeared. This was bad. Meanwhile, on Earth, the rescue mission had begun. The moment intelligence confirmed the humans were being captured, a special forces team was assembled. Their mission: track the HFY and bring back their people. In an underground command center, Dr. Marcus and a group of military officers watched as their scanners picked up anomalies in space, faint energy signals that matched HFY teleportation technology. "They're using short-range portals," Marcus said. "They can't teleport across the galaxy, so they must have a hidden base nearby." The general nodded. "Then we find it." Using advanced satellites and tracking data from the attacks, they pinpointed a location: a research station orbiting a distant moon. The general turned to his strike team. "Suit up. We're bringing our people home." Back in the HFY research station, Daniel knew he had little time. The alien scientists were preparing a surgical table, sharpening strange tools. If he didn't act now, he wouldn't get another chance. Then he noticed something. The HFY were overconfident. They thought he was powerless. His restraints were made from metal bands, built to hold strong alien species, but they didn't expect a human to be able to resist them. Daniel flexed his wrists, testing the strength of the restraints. They were tight, but not unbreakable. Taking a deep breath, he tensed every muscle in his body and pulled with all his strength. The metal groaned. Kelvek turned, his eyes narrowing. "What are you?" Snap. The restraint snapped apart, the metal breaking under Daniel's sheer brute force. Before the aliens could react, Daniel grabbed a nearby equipment tray and swung it hard, slamming it into the nearest HFY. The alien scientists stumbled back with a snarl. Alarms blared. Guards rushed into the room, raising their plasma rifles. But it was useless. Daniel charged forward. He grabbed the first guard and threw him into another, sending them crashing into a console. The second guard tried to swing a glowing energy blade, but Daniel ducked and delivered a powerful punch to the alien's chest. The HFY fell instantly, gasping in shock. The remaining scientists backed away, terrified. Daniel grabbed one of their communication devices and growled, "I hope you're listening, Zelfar. I'm leaving this place, and I'm taking every human with me." Kelvek, still lying on the floor, sneered, "You think you can escape alone?" Daniel grinned. "Who said I was alone?" At that moment, the walls of the research station shook with explosions. The human rescue team had arrived. Outside the station, human ships moved fast and hard. Fighter jets, modified for space combat, blasted through the HFY defenses. Soldiers wearing advanced combat suits breached the outer walls, storming the station. Inside, Daniel ran through the hallways, taking down any HFY that got in his way. He soon found a holding area. Dozens of captured humans, locked in energy cages. He smashed the control panel, releasing them. One of the prisoners, a scientist, stared at him in shock. "How did you escape?" Daniel smirked. "Turns out, they forgot one thing. We don't break easily." With the station falling apart and human forces sweeping through, the HFY panicked. Their once powerful research base had turned into a war zone. As Daniel and the rescued prisoners boarded the evacuation ships, he looked back at the burning station. Kelvek, covered in wounds, glared at him from the distance. "This isn't over," the scientist snarled. Daniel grinned. "No, it's just getting started." With that, the humans blasted away, escaping as the research station exploded behind them. The HFY had tried to uncover humanity's secrets. Instead, they had learned something far more terrifying. Humans don't just survive. They fight back. The ruins of the HFY research station floated in space, broken and burning. What was once a symbol of their technological power was now a graveyard of shattered metal. Inside the warship Zorvek, Warlord Vrotan stood in silence, his 4 glowing eyes fixed on the wreckage. His mind burned with rage and humiliation. The humans had not only escaped, but had destroyed one of their most advanced research facilities. And worse, his soldiers had failed to discover the secret behind their immunity. Vrotan's claws tightened into fists. This cannot continue. Beside him, Kelvek, the lead scientist who had barely escaped the destruction, bowed his head. His body was covered in bruises and burns, but his mind was still sharp. "We underestimated them," Kelvek admitted. "They are not like the other species we have conquered." Vrotan turned to him. "Did you learn anything?" Kelvek hesitated, then nodded. "Not enough. But I have a theory." The warlord's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Kelvek stepped forward and brought up a holographic display. It showed data from the failed experiments on Daniel, the human soldier who had broken free. "Their resistance is not due to technology," Kelvek said. "It is not a shield, armor, or an external factor. It is something inside them." Vrotan frowned. "Their biology." Kelvek nodded. "Yes, something in their bodies prevents our energy from affecting them. But I need more samples to confirm this." Vrotan's rage turned into cold calculation. If Kelvek was right, then this was no longer just about war. It was about control. If they could unlock the secret of human immunity, they could use it for themselves, or even turn it against humanity. Vrotan's voice was like a low growl. "Then we take Earth. No more small attacks. No more experiments." Kelvek's eyes gleamed. "A full-scale invasion." Vrotan nodded. "Yes. And this time, we will not fail." On Earth, the celebration was short-lived. Daniel and the other rescued soldiers had returned home as heroes. The world cheered for their victory, but in the secret halls of power, the leaders of Earth knew the truth. The war was far from over. In an underground military base, Daniel stood in a meeting room, surrounded by top generals and scientists. Dr. Marcus was at the front, going over the latest intelligence. "The HFY won't stop," Marcus said. "We embarrassed them. We destroyed their research, and now they will come back with everything they have." A general crossed his arms. "Then we need to be ready." Marcus shook his head. "It's worse than that. We believe the HFY now understand that our immunity is biological. If they can figure out the details, they might find a way to counter it." The room fell silent. If the HFY remove humanity's only advantage, then the next war wouldn't be a fight. It would be a slaughter. Daniel clenched his fists. "So what's our next move?" Marcus took a deep breath. "We need to strike first. If they're coming back for us, then we take the fight to them." The general nodded. "Agreed. We can't just wait for them to invade again. A new plan was formed, a preemptive attack on the XL-FAR fleet before they could strike Earth. But first, they needed information. They needed to know when and where the XL-FAR would attack. Meanwhile, far away in deep space, a secret meeting was taking place. Not all alien species were loyal to the XL-FAR. Many civilizations had suffered under their rule, their planets conquered, and their people enslaved. One such species was the Tariq, a race of highly intelligent beings who had long opposed the XL-FAR in secret. Inside a hidden space station, a Tariq spy named Vila activated a secure transmission. She had been watching the XL-FAR fleet, and what she discovered made her blood turn cold. The XL-FAR were gathering their entire armada, a fleet large enough to wipe out an entire planet, and their destination was clear: Earth. Vila knew she had to act fast. She adjusted her communicator and sent out a message on an encrypted human frequency. "This is Agent Vela of the Tariq Resistance. I bring urgent news. The XL-FAR invasion has begun." Back on Earth, alarms blared. Dr. Marcus and the generals received Vela's message. The XL-FAR were already on their way. Daniel stood up. "Then we don't have time to wait." The general nodded. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to meet them in space." The war was no longer about defense. Humanity was going on the offensive. For the first time in history, humans would take the fight beyond Earth's skies. And the XL-FAR would soon learn. Humanity doesn't just survive. They fight. The blackness of space stretched endlessly before them. Inside the human warship Titan's Wrath, Daniel stood among the command crew, his eyes locked on the holographic display. The XL-FAR armada was approaching. Hundreds of alien warships, shaped like twisted black daggers, moved in perfect formation. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever faced. The crew of Titan's Wrath was silent, their faces tense. They had trained for this, but this was no simulation. This was war. Dr. Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom. "Their weapons still won't harm us, but don't get overconfident. The XL-FAR are smart. If they have found a way to counter our immunity, we must be ready." The general gave a sharp nod. "All ships, hold position. We strike when they enter range." The XL-FAR fleet continued its advance. Daniel clenched his fists. The fate of Earth rested on this battle. Aboard the XL-FAR flagship, Warlord Vrotan watched the human fleet. A cruel smile stretched across his face. "Foolish creatures. They dare face us in open space." Kelvek, the lead scientist, stood beside him. His claws danced across a holographic console. "Their immunity is still a mystery, but we have a new strategy." Vrotan's eyes gleamed. "Then begin." Kelvek nodded. "Deploy the disruptor field." A low hum vibrated through the XL-FAR fleet. Massive devices attached to their warships activated, sending out invisible waves of energy. Kelvek grinned. "This will interfere with their physiology. If their immunity is biological, this field should weaken them." Vrotan chuckled. "Then let's see if the humans can still fight." He raised his hand. "Attack." Back on Titan's Wrath, Daniel felt it instantly. A strange pressure filled his chest. His limbs felt heavier. His breathing became shallow, as if the air had suddenly thinned. Around him, crew members gasped, gripping consoles for support. "What's happening?" a pilot asked, his voice strained. Marcus's voice came through the speakers. "The XL-FAR have deployed something new. It's affecting our bodies." The general cursed. "Status report." A scientist on the bridge checked the readings. "It's an energy field. It's not directly harming us, but it's slowing us down, weakening us." Daniel gritted his teeth. The XL-FAR had found a way to counter their advantage. "They can't kill us, but they can make us too weak to fight." The general slammed a fist on the console. "We need to destroy those field generators." Daniel took a deep breath. His body ached, But he forced himself to stand. Then we take the fight to them. The battle began. Human warships charged forward, unleashing railgun fire and missile barrages. The HFY fleet returned fire with glowing plasma beams. Normally, human ships would have charged in fearless, knowing their crews were immune to alien weapons. But under the disruptor field, everything was different. Pilots struggled to maneuver their fighters. Soldiers found it harder to aim their weapons. Even the ship's engines seemed to lag. The HFY took advantage, pressing forward with ruthless efficiency. On Titan's Wrath, the general shouted, "We need those disruptors gone now." Daniel grabbed a communicator. "I'll go." The general looked at him. "Are you sure?" Daniel smirked. "I'm still stronger than any of them." The general nodded. "Then take a strike team. Disable those generators." Minutes later, Daniel and his team launched in drop pods, heading straight for HFY command ship. As their pods crashed into the enemy warship, Daniel burst out, pulse rifle ready. HFY soldiers turned in shock. They raised their weapons, but their plasma shots did nothing. Even weakened, Daniel and his team fought like demons. They tore through the HFY defenses, moving toward the disruptor generators. Kelvek watched through security cameras, his expression twisting in frustration. "Impossible. They should be too weak to fight." Vrotan growled. "Then send everything we have. They must not reach the generators." But it was too late. Daniel's team fought through the last wave of defenders. He reached the disruptor core, a massive glowing machine pulsing with alien energy. Without hesitation, Daniel planted explosives along its surface. He activated his communicator. "Charges set. We're leaving." His team rushed back to the drop pods as alarms screamed through the HFY ship. As soon as they launched back into space, Daniel pressed a button. Boom! The HFY warship erupted into flames, its disruptor field failing instantly. The effect was immediate. Human forces recovered. Their strength returned, their movements sharpened. Titan's Wrath's captain saw the change and shouted, "All ships, advance." The battle turned. Human warships ripped through the HFY fleet, firing relentlessly. Vrotan roared in rage. "Fall back. Retreat." Kelvek shook his head in disbelief. They are unstoppable." The HFY fled, their once mighty armada reduced to broken wreckage. As the last enemy ships jumped to hyperspace, a cheer erupted across the human fleet. They had won. Back on Titan's Wrath, Daniel stood in the command center. The general clapped him on the shoulder. "You saved us out there." Daniel exhaled, still catching his breath. "They'll be back." Marcus nodded. "Yes, but now they know the truth." The general smirked. "They thought we were weak. They thought we couldn't adapt." Daniel grinned. "And now they know nothing stops humanity." As the fleet turned toward Earth, they all knew one thing. The war was far from over. The remnants of the HFY fleet limped through space, their once mighty armada shattered by humanity's counterattack. Aboard the flagship Zorvek, Warlord Vrotan paced, his claws tapping angrily against the cold metal floor. His pride had been wounded, his army humiliated. Kelvek, the lead scientist, stood nervously beside a holotable, analyzing data. "The humans have proven to be more resilient than we expected." Vrotan slammed his fist against the table, making the display flicker. "They should have been crushed. Even after we weakened them, they fought harder." Kelvek hesitated. "It is not just immunity. It is something else, something deeper in their nature. They refuse to submit." Vrotan growled, his four glowing eyes narrowing. "Then we take away their will to fight." Kelvek straightened. "You have a plan." The warlord's voice was cold. "Yes, if we cannot break their bodies, we will break their spirit." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the Oblivion Protocol." Kelvek's breath caught. "You mean?" Vrotan's gaze was fierce. "Yes, We will strike at the heart of their world. The scientist hesitated. But if we fail? Vrotan's voice was a low growl. Failure is no longer an option. The HFY's final attack had begun. On Earth, the war room deep beneath the Earth's surface was filled with tension. Daniel stood beside General Williams and Dr. Marcus, watching the latest intelligence reports. The human fleet had won the battle in space, but the HFY weren't finished. A new signal had been detected, one unlike anything before. Marcus frowned, analyzing the data. They're not retreating. They're regrouping and heading straight for Earth. The general's expression darkened. They're desperate. Daniel clenched his fists, which means they're more dangerous than ever. Suddenly, an alarm blared. A holographic warning flashed red. Marcus's eyes widened. Incoming transmission from the HFY. The room fell silent. The warlord himself was calling them. The screen flickered, and Vrotan's monstrous face appeared, his four glowing eyes filled with hatred. "Humans," he snarled, "you have defied us for too long." The general folded his arms. "We're still here, aren't we?" Vrotan bared his sharp teeth. "Not for long. You think you are strong, but your strength comes from your home, from your families, your cities, your people." Daniel's blood turned cold. "What are you planning?" Vrotan's voice was filled with malice. "We have deployed oblivion bombs across your world." A stunned silence filled the room. Marcus leaned forward. "What is an oblivion bomb?" Kelvek's voice came from the background of the transmission. "Unlike our other weapons, this does not rely on energy fields. This is raw destruction. Your immunity will not save you." Daniel's heartbeat pounded. If these bombs were real, humanity's greatest advantage would be useless. Vrotan leaned closer to the screen. "Surrender now, or your cities will burn." The transmission cut out. The war room erupted into chaos. The general slammed a fist on the table. "They're bluffing." Marcus shook his head. "No, the HFY don't bluff. We need to find those bombs. Fast." Daniel grabbed his gear. "Then we don't have time to waste. Let's stop them." The hunt for the bombs. Teams were deployed across the planet. Satellites scanned for unusual energy readings. Special forces moved into action. Daniel and his team raced against time, tracking the first signal to a remote desert base. As their ship landed, he looked at the barren landscape. "If I were an alien warlord, where would I hide a bomb?" A soldier beside him checked a scanner. Underground. They moved quickly, entering an abandoned mining facility. Inside, strange alien machines hummed with an eerie glow. Daniel spotted a massive black sphere, pulsing with red energy. The Oblivion Bomb. Marcus's voice crackled over the comms. "We found another one in Asia, and another in South America." The HFY had placed these bombs everywhere. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Then we disable them. All of them." As he approached the device, the walls shook. Zelfar warriors emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. Daniel gritted his teeth. They won't make this easy. The battle erupted. Daniel and his team charged forward, dodging plasma fire. Even though the HFY's weapons were useless against them, their numbers were overwhelming. A soldier shouted, "They're trying to buy time." Daniel's focus sharpened. "Then we don't let them." He rushed to the bomb's control panel. The alien symbols were strange, but he didn't need to understand them. He just needed to destroy them. With a single shot, he blasted the control panel. Sparks flew. The bomb's energy dimmed. Marcus's voice crackled in. "We're disabling the others now. Keep going." Daniel turned, breathing heavily. The battle wasn't over yet. The final bomb. Reports came in. Bombs were being neutralized across the world. But one remained, and it was hidden inside the Earth's largest city. Vrotan's furious voice echoed through their radios. "You cannot stop us. We will erase your world." Daniel stood with his team, staring at the final target. The last Oblivion bomb sat inside a towering skyscraper. They had minutes before it detonated. The general's voice came over the radio. "This is it. If you fail, we lose everything." Daniel nodded. "We won't fail." As the countdown ticked lower, Daniel ran straight toward the final battle. The fate of humanity depended on him now. The final Oblivion bomb sat deep inside a towering skyscraper, its dark surface pulsing like a beating heart. Red energy flowed across its surface, and a countdown timer flickered in alien symbols. 5 minutes remained. Daniel and his team rushed through the broken glass doors of the building, weapons ready. The air was filled with the hum of alien technology and the distant roar of Sci-Fi ships battling human forces outside. "Move fast," Daniel ordered, his pulse racing. "We don't get a second chance." The last defense. As they reached the central lobby, Sci-Fi warriors emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them. They stood in a defensive formation, blocking the way forward. Each alien's sharp blue armor glowed, and their claws twitched in anticipation. A deep, familiar voice echoed through the building. "You cannot stop us, human." Daniel's eyes narrowed as Warlord Vrotan stepped forward. His 4 glowing eyes burned with rage, and his massive frame towered over his soldiers. Daniel raised his rifle. "I've heard that before." Vrotan bared his sharp teeth. "But this time, it is true." The warlord raised a clawed hand, and the Sci-Fi warriors charged. Plasma blasts lit up the air, but the human soldiers pushed forward, even as their bodies ached from exhaustion, even as the Sci-Fi warriors fought with desperation. Humanity refused to fall. Daniel dodged a strike, grabbed an alien by the arm, and slammed it into the ground. Another warrior lunged, but he fired a quick shot, dropping it instantly. One of his teammates shouted, "They're slowing us down. We'll never reach the bomb in time." Daniel's eyes flicked to the countdown. 3 minutes left. His grip tightened on his weapon. No, they wouldn't fail. The final confrontation. Vrotan lunged at Daniel, swinging a massive energy blade. Daniel barely dodged as the weapon sliced into the floor, melting the metal. "You are strong," Vrotan admitted, "but your world will still burn." Daniel glared. "Not today." He fired a round into Vrotan's chest, but the warlord didn't fall. His armor absorbed the blast. The alien warlord laughed, stepping closer. "Your weapons are weak." Daniel smirked. "Then I won't use weapons." He rushed forward, dodging another strike. Before Vrotan could react, Daniel grabbed his arm, twisted it, and drove his knee into the alien's stomach. Vrotan let out a roar of pain. Daniel didn't stop. He punched the warlord's jaw, sending him staggering backward. The warlord gasped, staring at Daniel with shock and fury. "Impossible." Daniel wiped blood from his lip. "Humans don't need weapons to win." Vrotan snarled and lunged again, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed the warlord's blade arm, and with all his strength, flipped him over his shoulder, slamming him into the ground. Vrotan coughed, his body twitching. Daniel grabbed his radio. "Team, status." "We reached the bomb," a soldier replied, "but we can't shut it down. It's locked." Daniel's heart pounded. 1 minute left. There was only one way. Sacrifice and victory. Daniel ran to the bomb. His team stood around it, their faces tense. Marcus's voice crackled through the radio. "That thing goes off. Earth is gone." Daniel scanned the device, then looked at the glowing energy core. "Can we overload it?" A soldier checked his scanner. "Maybe, but we'd need someone to manually trigger the energy surge." A heavy silence fell over the team. They all knew what that meant. Daniel exhaled. "I'll do it." His teammate grabbed his arm. "If you do this." Daniel smiled. "Then make sure this fight was worth it." He placed his hand on the bomb's core. The energy burned, but he ignored the pain. His final message went through the radio. Tell Earth, we never stopped fighting. And then, he activated the overload. A blinding white light filled the skyscraper as the bomb's energy imploded. The shockwave sent every XL far within range crashing to the ground. The last bomb was gone. The war was over. Aftermath. High above Earth, the remaining Sci-Fi fleet saw the explosion. Their leader was gone. Their greatest weapon was destroyed. They had lost. Without orders, the remaining ships turned away from Earth and vanished into hyperspace. On the ground, General Williams and Dr. Marcus stood in the ruined streets, watching the skies clear. The general's voice was heavy. He saved us all. Marcus nodded, and the XL-FAR will never forget what happened here. 1 month later, a massive crowd gathered in the heart of Earth's capital. A statue stood tall, a tribute to Daniel and all who had fought in the war. A plaque at the base read, "Humanity is unbreakable." The people stood in silence, then raised their fists in the air. The message was clear. Humanity had won, and they would always fight for their future. The end.